I knew the time would come, I'd have to pay for my mistake. I can't blame you for what you're doing to me, girl, even though my heart aches. Your dreams have all come true, just the way you planned them. So I'll just step aside, I'm gonna step aside and lend a helping hand in. 'Cause I could never make you unhappy. No, I couldn't do that, girl. Only wish I could love you so. Makes it so very hard to know. So very hard to know. 'Cause I love you so. So very hard to know. I love you so. I could never make you unhappy. No, I couldn't do that, girl. Only wish I did love you so. Makes it so very hard to go. So very hard to go. 'Cause I love you so. So very hard to go. I love you so. So very hard to go. And it ain't easy to walk away when a man loves somebody. Hey, hey, hey.
Welcome to today's ADU Best Practice webinar series sponsored by the Casita Coalition. And I am grateful for all of the support from folks who help make these webinars possible, including Meta and Union Bank as our major sponsors. Sponsors of the webinar series in particular, the Stowers team of Cross Country Mortgage, Umpqua Bank, the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area, the Bridge Association of Realtors, Allen Matkins, and Housing Trust Silicon Valley. And as you saw on the introductory slides, this wouldn't be possible without partnerships and coalition building, which is inherent in our DNA as the Casita Coalition, including academia, associations of governments across the state, nonprofits like Build It Green, National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, Bay Area Council, SPUR, FACE LA, California Planning Roundtable, California YIMBY, and Circulate San Diego. And what these coalitions mean to us is that people who believe we need more housing in every community for all kinds of people are coming together to start to speak with one voice on housing policy. And that really is part of the role of these conversations today, where we bring together local government innovators with others to talk about this stuff and to try and all do better together. So thank you all for your time and attention and for joining us today. I want to give a special shout out to Oakland's own Adapt Dwellings and its president, Steve Edrington, who sponsored us today and will be joining us. And also to Bobby Arte and Wellnest ADU, which is a Bay Area-based builder of ADUs and will be a part of our panel and is being highlighted. So I think virtually this may be the first webinar we've done where everybody on the call is actually an official member of the Casita Coalition. And I want to just take a moment because we're moving into really the end of our second year. The beginning of our first year featured a meeting with Mayor Schaaf in Oakland. I think maybe we had 15 people around a table in a room. We didn't actually have members then, so it was just people who were enthusiastic about the idea. And Mayor Schaaf does what she does well, which is inspire people and remind us that what matters is that we work together across the lines that want to separate us, like city boundaries. And we think regionally and we think statewide about not just housing policy, but all the policies that affect our communities. So Thank you, Libby, for being our first inspirational speaker. And we are delighted to be here 2 years later with Oakland launching its own really exciting ADU program.
Denise, thank you. And thank you for all your leadership. You know how inspired I was to go through the CASA process. So it's only appropriate that now we have birthed the little casita process, and that Oakland is always proud to play a role in the story of great things. And casita is a great thing. I am so impressed with all of you to see the growth that you've accomplished in just those 2 years since that little meeting around that table in Oakland, your first official meeting. Look at you now. And these last 2 years have not been easy ones to build a movement and to make change, because obviously we have had tremendous distractions. But in this journey that we've all had together through these last difficult years, how much have we realized just how important home is? We have all gotten to know our homes much better than we ever could have dreamed. And we are painfully aware of those who don't have the luxury of an affordable, stable, comforting home. And I really admire the way that Casita is lifting up the ADU movement, not just as a bunch of laws or codes that need to be changed, not just thinking about construction and boards and nails, but thinking about the real human impact of this movement. The idea that people who are struggling as homeowners can stabilize their incomes and stay rooted in the communities that they love and where they've been born and raised. The idea that we can add diversity to our housing stock and to our neighborhoods, that we can allow access to high opportunity neighborhoods, and that the ADU movement provides job opportunities for the local workforce, resiliency for our neighborhoods. All these benefits are things that I hope you lift up, not just through your advocacy, your geeky policy writing, but also our storytelling. We have to change the narrative about what a great community looks like. And we all know that that starts with diversity. I want to also just mark, how this movement has taken off in Oakland. In 2016, Oakland issued permits for 30 ADUs, 30. In 2019, we issued permits for 300 ADUs, 10 times in just 3 years. Wow, that's what I call a movement. And of course, while the pandemic did slow down some ADU production, one of the silver linings is that we brought so many more of our processes and our approvals to an online platform. I think all of our governments accelerated the transition to online interactions thanks to the pandemic. So let's see that and celebrate it as a silver lining. And then I'll just end my welcoming comments with my call to action. And that is, let us continue to put equity first. We believe that ADUs are a powerful force for equity, and that we must be intentional to ensure that they are accessible to everyone, and especially those who will benefit the most. And that's why I am really excited that this audience today is going to learn about the Keys to Equity initiative that we are doing here in Oakland to really focus on Black and other disadvantaged home owners to stabilize their ownership, to provide needed income, but to also put some of our Black small businesses to work in creating ADUs. So just very excited for you all to learn about this. It is a phenomenal initiative. Every city should replicate it. And then last, I'll pose to you a problem that I don't think we've solved yet, and we need everyone's thought partnership in this. As with many things, we have two goods that are in conflict with each other. And recently in Oakland, we are struggling with the question of allowing ADUs in wildfire-prone areas. How do we balance the increasing risk of wildfires as we grapple with climate change and drought with the need to build density, equity, and access in the very same neighborhoods that happen to be at the highest risk of wildfire? I hope that your great minds can find a win-win solution where we do take into account this real danger, but not allow it to stop our advancement of this incredible tool for equity, for diversity, for affordability, and for resilient neighborhoods. So with that, have a fantastic webinar. Thank you so much for allowing me to welcome everyone to this special Casita event.
Thank you so much, Mayor Schaaf. It's always a pleasure and an inspiration to have you be our keynote speaker. We're grateful for all your housing work and leadership. And I take those two challenges as really the next two challenges of us as a group. How do we use these tools that have been crafted to promote equity and inclusion? And how do we balance the very real needs of housing with the very real threat of climate change? So always more work to do. We look forward to embracing those challenges. But starting with today, let's focus on equity with your team. We have a really exciting new private partnership within the city of Oakland that includes a number of local nonprofits with funding from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And I would like to introduce Darin Ranelletti, the Mayor's Director of Housing Policy. I'm not sure, Darin, if I got your title right, but the Mayor's Housing Boss in Oakland, and a longtime friend and colleague, and frankly, inspiration for how to really think about the power and tools of local government and how they can be best used to create improved outcomes for all kinds of urban residents. So thanks, Darin, for being with us today and being the good leader on these things that you are.
Well, thanks, Denise, and thanks for having us. It was great being with the Casita Coalition 2 years ago at the inaugural meeting in Oakland. And like the mayor said, it's amazing what you all have accomplished in 2 years. And thanks for inviting us. Really excited to share with you what we've been working on here in Oakland. So I have a team of folks here that's going to present some information. So we have a presentation. So I'm going to share my screen and start that. So as Denise said, I work for the City of Oakland in the Mayor's office. I'm the Policy Director for Housing Security and just really all things housing. And under that portfolio is really coordinating all the various ADU related activities and programs in the city, whether it's from a permitting or funding or community engagement perspective. ADUs have really been a focus for me over the last few years. And then we're going to hear from Lynette and Meredith Rupp of Urban Planning Partners, who did some research on ADUs for the city that has really informed and driven a lot of our work on ADUs. And then we'll hear from Nikki Beasley of Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services about the Keys to Equity initiative, which we're really excited to launch, that provides assistance to homeowners. So before we jump in, just wanted to map out for you how I envision a successful ADU program at a city. You need all of these building blocks to fit together. You need to have the regulations in place. You need to have an efficient and effective permitting process. And you need to provide assistance to homeowners, because this is one of the areas in housing where we actually ask homeowners to become developers, right? To take on that risk and that complicated process. So they need assistance. And then lastly, research. The ADU movement and world has just exploded. There is so much going on, and it can be overwhelming, particularly for jurisdictions that are struggling with staffing shortages. So it's really important that that work be driven by data-informed research, so that precious staff time is spent on the things that will have the most impact. So I'm really excited that we'll be able to share with you how we've used the results from our research to drive our work. So the presentation today is going to focus on the bottom two boxes, the homeowner assistance and the Keys to Equity program, and then the research that we did. But I recognize that we could spend a whole webinar in each of these boxes, but we're going to focus on those two today. And I think what sets Oakland apart from other places and what we're hoping people will be inspired by today is really two things: this idea of research and taking a analytical, data-informed approach to ADU programming at the city level. And then finally, as the mayor said, the need to focus on racial equity. And let me be clear, if we're not intentional about racial equity in the ADU world, then ADUs have the potential to exacerbate existing disparities, because we would see wealthy homeowners adding ADUs and receiving the benefits of ADUs and not others, and that would increase the gap in wealth and in other indicators in our community. So it's really, really critical that this wonder of ADUs and all the benefits that they bring is really accessible to the entire community. So with that, I'm going to switch it over to Urban Planning Partners, who can walk us through the research.
Thanks, Darin. I'm Meredith Rupp here with Lynette Diaz, and we're here to share the research. If you can go to the next slide, Darin. Our research was funded by a One Bay Area grant from ABAG MTC, and it included not just the research, but actually several phases. We, based on our research, looked at different solutions that might address barriers to ADU development. We chose a couple of solutions that we were able to implement and did a little bit of outreach to publicize those solutions. But today I'll focus my presentation, if you can click, Darin, on the background research part and the solutions implementation. And next slide. The research that we did is all together culminating in what we've called the Existing Conditions and Barriers Report, which is available on the City of Oakland's ADU website, which you can find in the chat. And the purpose of the research was to identify barriers to ADU development and to better understand the existing conditions, including housing options relative to race and income. We did a whole slew of things. We looked at census data, all of the great data already out there, especially from the Turner Center. We estimated the number of unpermitted ADUs in Oakland, did a lot of mapping and geospatial analysis. We'll show you some of that. Did some economic feasibility tests, and then did a lot of engagement too. We got 650 responses to our online survey for Oakland homeowners. And we did 4 focus groups, one with ADU professionals. Some of you are on the call today, so thank you for participating again. And then one with homeowners that have ADUs, one for low and moderate income homeowners who do not have ADUs, and then also one with city staff. So I'll start our findings with what the existing ADU landscape looks like. If you can move ahead. Thanks, Darin. The image you see here is an interactive map, and it shows where existing ADUs that are permitted are located within the city. The orange is for building permit applications and the dark purple blue for planning ones. And you can look at the permit locations on top of different layers of census data. So the one shown here is median family income, but you can also look at home ownership rates, percentage that's non-white. And throughout it all, we found that the ADUs are not just geographically spread, but also socioeconomically pretty spread out. So that was one really surprising finding for us. And gave us hope that we're not starting out already really in the hole. Based on our survey, we found just a couple of interesting statistics about ADUs in Oakland that I'll share on the left here. The average unit size was 540 square feet. The average rent was about $1,100, which is affordable to someone who makes 60% of AMI in Oakland. And that does include about 1/3 of people who said they did not charge rent for their ADU. We heard that people most commonly use their ADUs for a long-term rental, 45% of people. 20% used it for family or friends, 6% for a short-term rental illicitly, and about 55% knew their tenants in some way before the time of move-in. Despite for a long-term rental, we were really surprised that 30% of homeowners that have an ADU said it was currently unoccupied at the time of the survey. And part of that is just, those who use it as an office or studio for art or what have you. But we also think that that might have been reflective of people who were worried about maintaining flexibility or had concerns about being a landlord. And then finally, one shocking finding was just how many units, ADUs, we think are unpermitted out there. We took a sample of listings on Redfin and looked for hints that there might be an ADU on the property and compared that with the city's permit data and found that 91% of the ADUs in the Redfin sample did not have the permit data to back them up. So if we extrapolate that sample and assume that what was on Redfin that day is representative of Oakland, then we're looking at about 91% of ADUs are permitted, which comes to 13,600 units. So sobering to put some numbers to it. We also looked at just the potential. So now we know there what could also come to be. So on the next slide, you'll see we did a spatial analysis of what kind of ADUs could be accommodated in Oakland. Oakland single family ADUs are categorized in two ways. The category 1 ADUs are ADUs that can be within the existing footprint of the home or an existing accessory structure. And category 2 ADUs require new construction. And we applied, I should step back and say we did this analysis in 2019 before the laws had taken in that limit the minimum lot size requirements or the lot coverage and setbacks. So at the time of the research, there were more regulations about setbacks and FAR, but we applied different zoning and geospatial tools and found that the category 1 ADU potential, so the ADUs within a home, came to about 52,480 parcels, which is huge. And then when you looked at the zoning standards for if you wanted to do new construction, it went down significantly, but still 18,000 parcels. And I'll just note that this exercise did include extrapolating parcels that were in very high fire severity zones and the circulation requirements for Oakland at the time about the roads width and dead end access. So I'm seeing that this fire safety and housing is still ongoing. But you can see a lot of potential for ADUs in Oakland. We of course know that parcels and zoning the land is just one step of building an ADU. So we wanted to see, do people have a reason to build them and do they have the resources to? So on the next slide, you can see we looked at the level of home equity people had and also what kind of things about their housing situation drive them to build an ADU. And from Property Radar on home equity levels, and we found that a huge portion of single family homes, 73%, owned at least half of the equity in their home. We also looked at several indicators based on existing research about what might drive people to build an ADU. So things like underutilized space, if you have an adult child or a person with a disability living with you. And in Oakland, we found that space underutilization and presence of seniors, a senior in your household, that occurred in over half of the households we looked at based on census. And presence of a person with a disability was present in over 1/3 of households. It's important to note that those two indicators are actually all areas of demand experienced most often in lower income households. And then the final bullet here, an important thing to consider for program design, over half of the low income homeowners with underutilized space own their homes free and clear. So a lot of different variables in our head at this point about the ADU potential and who could really benefit from an ADU. But as the mayor and as Darin have mentioned, a really important part of this project to our project team was looking at racial equity and infusing principles of fair and just into the project. And so we looked very specifically at race and housing. If you'll go to the next slide. These graphs are all from the Oakland Equity Indicators Report and Oakland at Home Report, and those are both based on census data. And you can see here, the majority of Black households and Latino households do not own their home, 74% and 69% respectively, compared to 44% of white households who do not. So this means that half of white households own their home. And then if you look at those households that do own their home, what does income by race look like? And that's the bottom graphic here. And You can see almost twice as much as Black earners. And you can also, I should mention the line that says Oakland across the bottom. That's the citywide average across all races. And you can see that white households make 30% more on average than the typical Oakland homeowner. We also looked at cost burden for both homeowners and renters. You can see across both categories, Black or African-American households are the most impacted. African Americans make up 26% of homeowners, but 35% of the homeowners who are cost burdened. You can see about 50%, so 48% of Oaklanders who are renters are cost burdened, but closer to 60%, 58% of renters who are cost burdened, or 50% cost burdened. And then the final finding that I'll share is that race and home equity, we looked at property radar figure 16. The households with the mortgage are, sorry, I'm getting internet connection unstable. So Lynette,
Meredith,
if it gets too bad, please jump in.
Yeah, Meredith, why don't you go ahead and turn your video off because it is getting a little bit. There you go.
Hopefully that helps. Looking at households who are underwater on their mortgage, the biggest tranche is Black households. Looking at those who have the highest bucket of equity, 75 to 99% equity. The lowest tranche is Black households. So all of this told us that wealth building opportunities associated with ADUs could really benefit Black households, but they also likely can't afford the initial construction costs and might be turned away from traditional financial institutions as well. So all the research culminated in what we identified as several barrier subject areas. So the first is related to process and regulations. This probably won't surprise many of you, but throughout a lot of the outreach we did with homeowners, we heard that the permitting process is a barrier, conflicting information, not having a transparent process, and just not knowing where to turn in the beginning. We also heard that rules and requirements are a barrier. There's not very much flexibility and once again, inconsistent. And then finally, tenant protections were a source of misunderstanding and fear. Barriers related to construction and legalization were also a huge topic. Really the number one thing was cost. Cost and fees were a huge barrier across the board. We also heard that it's hard to find a trusted and available contractor. And then finally, with the number I shared earlier about the number of unpermitted units, we know they're very prevalent, but there's no incentive to legalize them. And then specific to the research we did on housing and race, we know that people of color in Oakland are more likely to not own their home, to earn cost burdened, renters and be underwater on their mortgage, experience loan denial. So we really knew that we would need some targeted policies and programs, especially related to financing, to be able to help people of color unlock ADUs. So based on all of this research, we several potential solution areas. You can see them here. Just the information resources, helping people that didn't know where to turn. Could we make some changes to the regulations to try to increase flexibility? What kinds of internal tools or process changes like an ADU desk or a checklist could we create to try to make things a little more consistent and transparent? Of course, loan solutions and some kind of financial piece of this. Should we look at legalization? Should we look at a limited exemption for just cause for ADUs for homeowners that live on the property? So these were all things that we considered, and we broke them down into even more specific items than this. And what we did is we measured the options across our 3 project goals. We looked at our budget and we looked at staff capacity, and we ended up implementing the ones you see here. We have a guide to single family ADUs and a guide for landlords to try to, the uncertainty we kept hearing. We revised the property survey requirement. So it used to be required in almost all cases, and now it's only required if you're within 3 feet of a property line or on a slope of more than 20%. We started a program to get pre-approved plans in the system that the city's still working on. And then, of course, what you'll hear with the keys to equity, we have some loan solutions and partnerships going on. And then I will close with some lessons learned before you get to hear more about keys to equity. one simple thing is if you ask for people's income in your research, be sure to ask for household size so that you can then link up AMI based on that. We did not do that and found a workaround, but would have definitely been easier to have asked household size in our survey. Another is just really thinking about what you're going to do with your demographic data. The census definitions are, of course, different, with ethnicity being separate from race than how other people measure it. And think about, is it most important to know the information for the head of the household, for anyone in the household? So definitely collect the information, but think about how you're going to use it. And the last thing I'll say is our research really focused on homeowners, but one area of potential future research could be more about the tenant perspective. And I will close there and look forward to questions, but my email address is on this slide if you do have more specific things you wanted to ask about. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Meredith. So now we'll turn it over to Nikki Beasley to talk about the Keys to Equity program.
Thank you, Darin, and good morning, everyone. Good to see some familiar names, but for those that don't know, myself, Nikki Beasley, Executive Director of Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services and the Program Manager. We're an affordable housing organization that provides housing to low to moderate income families through our rental portfolio, a HUD-approved counseling agency who advocates for home ownership and really was the model in which we built the high-touch approach to this program, as we'll speak to later. And we do quite a bit of advocacy as it relates to consumer rights, specific to the Community Reinvestment Act, along with tenant and landlord rights, because we sit in the space of landlords. So next slide, Darin. What I would like to say is, as what was mentioned in the data, we too did a lot of outreach, and the logo that you see and the kind of the imagery that you'll see through this presentation really was speaking to the public and the folks that we wanted to target to get their feeling of what this would mean to them in their community. But as was mentioned in the data points earlier, that since 2011, apartment rents in the cities have increased over 72%, with incomes remaining the same. And if you go back to the data, looking specifically to the Black or African American population, you see the significant impact there. And then 80% of Oakland's lowest income households are cost burdened, which again, the data that was just shared exemplifies. And even through the COVID-19 with new research is showing that the communities that we care about the most are severely impacted since COVID. And then that 34% decline of Oakland residents, and we've seen the Black community moving out of what has historically been Black communities throughout the Bay Area. So again, no new news there, but great to validate that this information is real. Next slide. And one of the reasons that we were excited, Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services, to participate in the application process of putting our hat out there to be the program managers, because a lot of our work is stemming from the discrimination of housing, RNHS being founded back in 1981 by local residents in the city of Richmond who was addressing this same issue, redlining. And we do know that it continues to exist, even though it may not be as obvious as it has been before, but through gentrification and other means, we are seeing similar policies. So again, one of the reasons that we wanted to focus on how could we ensure that the Black community had access to this tool, knowing that there is a number of reasons why one would want to build an ADU, but how could we provide access to a community that has oftentimes been excluded? Next slide. The housing objectives in Oakland is to speak to increasing the affordable housing supply, and that really is our goal with the Keys to Equity program. What I say in many platforms is we're really here to test assumptions, because there's been a lot of things put out there. So the goal of the program is to see, can we increase affordable housing? We believe so, because of smaller units should indicate smaller rents. And the other assumption we're looking to prove is, can this build wealth in Black communities? Because there is an assumption that if they're generating more income, The goal is that it can offset the expense of the new debt as well as being a landlord, and that there will be some residual income that families can take part in to help build their wealth, and then also address the racial disparities to help increase ownership as well as increase or decrease the the rent burden for Black renters. Next slide. Increasing the equity in ADU access, as it was stated in the previous presentation, white households are significantly more likely to own single-family homes, and we see that on a day-to-day basis through our work as a HUD counseling agency. We actually created a program called the Changing the Narrative of Home Ownership. And since 2017, we've gotten over 200 first-time home buyers into new homes. But it really was because of this high touch approach that we have translated into the Keys to Equity program. And a lot of our CRA work holds banks accountable because banks have had a very challenging time getting people of color into ownership. And ADUs are more likely to be built in high resource areas. Black and brown neighborhoods in the Bay Area are likely to obtain an ADU permit and complete construction. So again, the program is designed to have access, and once you get access, helping a homeowner navigate through the process. Next slide. Limited ADU financing. Denise spoke to this through the Casitas work. We were real excited about the Keys to Equity program, hoping to model a financing product that could address some of the barriers, future rent, debt to income, LTV, which is a big issue in the ADU world because we understand the cost to build an ADU does not offset many times in value. And what we've heard through the appraisal industry is that the ADU is still being defined as a addition and not as a extra unit. So you're not getting dollar for dollar, which was also a part of our design of the program to try to mitigate the costs, which Wellness, our general contractor who's being highlighted, is looking at a per unit price to, again, minimize the cost so that the financing can be in line, because we can have a lot of assumptions, but our interest was to make sure we did not have any unintended consequences and that the homeowner did not end up being worse off than what they began in trying to build the ADU. And so we can go ahead to the next slide. So what is the Keys to Equity program? It is a high touch approach to a homeowner who has an interest in building an ADU. And we are clear that the Keys to Equity program is not going to solve all ADU problems, models, or concerns. So we're really explicit in understanding what it is we're attempting to do. And it's for that traditional backyard, you have an empty space, want to build a new build ADU. However, due the research that was shared earlier, as well as what we've defined as we've gotten embedded into community, we do know that there are some opportunities for legalization of ADUs or conversions. So we are looking at how the program can support that. But initially you have a homeowner who wants to build an ADU, and we take them through the process of one, education. We have a 6-module series that an individual, once accepted into our program, will have to go through from the beginning of their interest to the conclusion of their project. We have the design and project support, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides, where we have designed through our partnership of Blink Lab, having a catalog of models of ADUs that our participants can choose from to help eliminate cost of having to find your own architect and starting from scratch. And then also Wellness, who I've just mentioned, helping with the project management and as well as being the program contractor. And then the financing option that's being supported by Self-Help Federal Credit Union, who has addressed, again, the debt to income, LTV, looking at future rents, and through our partner and support of Chan Zuckerberg, putting together a loan guarantee to help mitigate some of the risks that the credit union may find in processing these loans. And then As I mentioned, other resources, not only education, but what we're also excited about, we also have funds set aside for pre-development costs, because as you look at the disparity of income, and our Black homeowners don't tend to have excess capital that they've put away to be able to address the pre-development costs, which we're anticipating to be about 10 to 15% of the total cost of the project. So our pre-development grant / loan pool will advance those dollars for the homeowner, with the anticipation of that pool being reimbursed at the time of close, so that we can continue to utilize those funds for future ADU projects. And then ideally, we can prove the assumption that we can bring new units to the market that are affordable. Next slide. And as I've mentioned through the conversation, these are our partners, and we cannot do this alone. It does take a village. We being the program management manager, Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services, Chan Zuckerberg being our funder, City of Oakland being a great thought partner. Can't thank Darin enough. He has been, on the onset, even developing the idea of what could happen. Let's imagine, to taking us from the idea and concept to now implementation. So City of Oakland has been a very proactive partner. And for those that are looking to figure out how to make this happen in community, I can't stress enough, you do need municipal support. And then one of our newer funders, the San Francisco Credit Union, San Francisco Foundation. And then the design was done by Blink Lab. If you go to our website, keystoequity.org, you can see the models that have been made available to our own homeowners, which is the catalog, and then Wellness, who is our general contractor. And then our community partners is HERA, Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. They are our curriculum designer and supporting us through the education models. RBA Creative, who has been our outreach partner. And again, I would stress, if you are going to be unapologetic about the community you want to serve, it is incredibly important that you're targeted and marketing and have influence and relationship with the community that you want to touch. And RBA Creative has been that outreach partner and was also instrumental in bringing community together to think through what the logo design and messaging would be around this program. And then Self-Help Federal Credit Union is our lending partner. And I do want to say this program, although we have a finance partner, the homeowner is not obligated to use Self-Help Federal Credit Union's product, because we do want people to know that they have the ability, the right, and the option to find their own financing. But as we've heard, that is limited. So we're pretty confident that most will be able to benefit by the product that's been designed for the program. Next slide. So in a broad overview, what it is to, Keys to Equity is to streamline the process for the homeowner. One, to help them navigate through the many dynamic steps that it takes, and us being infill developers ourselves, even when you think it's, it can be daunting. So we do know what the experience of a homeowner might be in trying to take on a project like this. It's providing access to a trusted general contractor who's also invested in the community, a trusted finance partner who also has great roots in the community, and then ourselves being a HUD counseling agency who has the ability to help a homeowner assess their financial ability to take on the next steps. Why? Because we want to solve for many of the problems that have been already identified, of closing the gap of income, closing the gap of wealth, closing the gap of ownership, making these opportunities accessible to a community that doesn't tend to get access first. And how we're doing it is through great collaborative partnership, our NHS being the one running the program, Wellness being our construction partner, HERA being our education partner, and then again, the credit union providing a customized product to help get the homeowner through process, as well as the City of Oakland opening up their processes to allow us to streamline the opportunity to get these models built once the homeowners identified the project. Next slide. This again is just a summary of how we are setting up the process. So I'll let you all look at this at your leisure. If you go again to our website, this presentation, keystoequity.org, is also presented there. You're welcome to share it with anyone in the city of Oakland that is a resident that would like to take advantage. The website is very robust with information. We also have an info session on our YouTube channel. That's also a part of the model that we recorded, one to present a similar presentation like this, but it was a great dialogue with questions and answers. Next slide, Darin. So the stakeholder benefits, the homeowner, we prove the assumptions. They get a unit on their property that can serve either for generational family living or as a rental to generate income in a very streamlined, effective process. We're providing the ability for tenants to find housing that is at an affordable rate. We also are highly encouraging our homeowners to look at Section 8 and subsidized housing because we feel it is a win-win where the homeowner can support a low-income resident to find housing at a fairly close to market rate rent to help offset their costs, but they are not obligated to do so. And then also, the last focus point is to assist Oakland with their housing goals, to be able to help with their mission of generating the housing that's needed to support the communities most in need. Next slide. And our guiding principle is that it's all about racial equity. I think that what highlights this program is that this is not a City of Oakland program. It is sponsored and to support Oakland residents. Oakland has been a great partner, but it allows us, by this not being a city program, allows us to be very focused on the community that we want to serve. This is not a program that is exclusive. We are very targeted of who we want to serve, which is the Black homeowner, but anyone can apply. And as I mentioned before, we do not want to cause harm, meaning the program was designed to really measure and make sure that we were managing any undue consequences by the assumptions that we were making, as well as trying to figure out, and I don't know if we have to solve for this, affordability, because whether you're building in our work a affordable unit or an at-market unit, it still costs the same. If you're building a 500 square foot property or a 750, the cost isn't reduced because of the size. It's still an expensive proposition. Again, why having a program general contractor is essential to try to mitigate that cost, and hopefully the price per unit will work for us because these are not cheap projects, as many of you know, and then making it scalable to what has been said before. This can be taken throughout the full landscape of Oakland as well as other communities. Next slide. The pilot goals is to produce more housing, assist the stability for the homeowner who may be at risk because of hardship to generate income, as well as not only to be able to manage the rental, but to be able to have additional income to where they can build wealth. What we have found in our short time with our launch being October 17th and interaction we've had with homeowners is that homeowners are understanding that they may not get the benefit of the ADU value at the time of build because how the appraisal industry is looking at ADUs, but they are finding at the time in which they choose to sell that that's where they see most of the value. So that's where we see the creation of wealth for a homeowner that may want to sell the property with an ADU attached at some time in the future. Next slide. Darin, next slide, or is that the end? Yeah, and as I said before, This is just a small portion of our team. This was at the Acoma Market where we had our official launch October 17th. Our team, Chan Zuckerberg, Wellness, that Self-Help Credit Union were all there. It was a great day for us. So that's just giving you a snippet of who's pulling this all together. Hank, who is here today, has really been the anchor of the work, being the day-to-day program manager, really pulling all this together. So I want to thank her publicly, because it really has been a heavy lift for our organization, and she played a large part of getting this to market. Next slide. Do want to talk about some of the results of what we're seeing related to what we've captured thus far. One of the things that the program did is we did what we considered a beta test. So after we got feedback from community as it related to what people wanted to see, what did they think about ADUs, we went back and said, well, would you be interested to apply? And it really allowed us to test some of our processes, application, the number of times we reached out, how long did it take? And then we did a soft launch, actually getting those people through our process. And our process looks like this. An individual completes an interest form saying, I would like to apply. It's during an open window. This open window is now from October 17th through December 3rd. Based on some preliminary answers, we get pretty invested, the value of their home, the cost or the outstanding mortgage, their income, their expected credit score, everything that we think a lender would want to know to see if it makes sense for them to move forward. If they answer the questions minimally based on what we know and lender or self-help is going to be needing to look at, we invite them to apply, where then they complete a full application that we get all of their financial documentation, we pull their credit report, which is a soft pull, doesn't impact the credit score. And then if they meet the minimum qualification of the credit union, we invite them to apply with the credit union. And so what we've been able to do is to assess through this process the best practices, again, on response time and all of that. And what you see here is based on the interest forms that we've collected, about 20% would like to rehab an existing ADU, which we believe might be more of that legalization, and over 80% do want to build an ADU, which was in line with what our initial intent was. And then the second pie chart shows that about 17% of those are garage conversion, 20% attached, and then the majority are detached. Next slide. And that is about 73, 75 participants where those numbers come from. Lessons learned, we need to take into consideration the community you're serving. I think that as you look to build this out in community, whomever you choose to take the lead needs to be invested, have relationship in the community, because of the disparity, there tends to be a trust factor. So it's important of who you have leading the charge. The lending product is important, which we learned later that many of our borrowers do have living trust. So before you finalize your lending product, you want to make sure that it will address all the needs of the community, and that people are interested. They want to know, they are interested in learning. It's important to them to have the information before they make the decisions. So I think that will conclude. And then here is our contact information. If you want to know any more about our program or share the information, please share our website.
Great. Thank you so much for that incredible presentation. I think, we've been doing these best practice webinars monthly throughout the year, and the depth of Oakland's research and the degree of focus on equity is really unique in the programs that we've looked at statewide. So we really appreciate all the work that went into this. This was an incredible amount of work just to get to the launch, which was only 30 days ago. So the fact that you have any lessons learned yet is also kind of amazing. And one, I just want to tease out, I want to introduce our interview panel, for our Q&A panel. We've got about 25 minutes for Q&A. So I'm joined by fellow Casita Coalition board member, Rafael Perez, who is a real estate broker with the home map down in the San Diego region. Steve Edrington, the owner of Adapt Dwellings in Oakland. Renee Schaaf, the director of a similar nonprofit public-private partnership, but in Napa, Sonoma County, that works with all 16 cities up there, Napa, Sonoma, ADU. Noting really, I think here, the importance of having not just government efforts, but community-based nonprofits providing a better scaffolding for homeowners who need help. Lynette Diaz from Urban Planning Partners. Lynette's firm did the initial research that helped lead to the program design in Oakland. And last but not least, Bobby Arte from the Wellness Company, who's doing incredibly exciting work on the ADU build side, but also in the storytelling about how ADUs really help families. So welcome to our panelists. Who would like to kick us off with the question of the folks who did the presentations? I'm going to pass the mic to Rafael, since as a fellow board member, I'm going to give him a little deference there. And also he's in San Diego and he sees, you know, he's got a different regional perspective than I think those of us who are based in the Bay Area. So Rafael, do you have a question for the Oakland team?
Yeah, so my question is, you mentioned that there's a specific financial product people could use to finance this through the partnership. Have you seen people going outside of that? And if so, just an idea of what it is they're looking at, or even in their exploration process when they're comparing the internal one with, you know, other things available in the market. I'm just curious as to.
Yes, so we have found people are doing the traditional equity loan, equity line, or refi. People are considering the 203K, and then the one Fannie Freddie product that is geared toward ADU. So they are, you know, looking at a varied products.
Just as a follow-on to that, one question was, what's the interest rate of the self-help credit union programs? Or can you give us any just highlights of what that loan looks like?
So as most institutions, their interest rates change daily. It is based on credit score and risk. But I would say it's comparable to what most of the refi mortgage market is right now. So probably in the mid threes, high fours. But again, it is based on a number of different variables.
Great. Rafael, did you have a follow-up on the lending side?
Yeah, that program, it's a first mortgage program, not a second, is that correct?
Yes, so what it starts out as a construction loan and then gets converted to a first mortgage once construction is completed.
And before we leave the topic of the finance partner, there may not be an answer to this question, but credit unions are a very, I think, maybe untapped resource so far in terms of the ability to do ADU lending because of how they're structured, and they're not as reliant on the federal GSEs to provide a guarantee at the back end. Do you guys have any advice about how to engage more community-based credit unions in this space?
I would say it really is going to be in lenders. Traditional lenders can do it as well, but they have to be willing to do a portfolio product, meaning that they're going to own that debt for the duration, and many aren't in position to hold it or choose not to hold a 30-year note. So with the credit union, and this is a portfolio product of theirs, it's just finding those institutions are willing to hold the debt.
Great, thank you.
So I can jump in with a question here on that topic. Nikki, are you finding, this is Celeste with the Casita Coalition, are you finding that you have some homeowners who wish to pool funds from other homeowners, from other family members to create the ADU? Is that something that can be structured with a loan product?
So we did have one borrower who had recently purchased, and it was not so much income, it was more about equity because she had recently purchased, but she was going to need everyone who assisted with the purchase to also be willing to come in on the ADU. I can say, which we didn't share, but we'll be happy to share later, is what we're finding is that our homeowners are really in the moderate income level. So income's not typically the issue. The issue is either the loan to value or needing to possibly reduce, minimal debt.
Okay, and then I take it that Bobby and Wellnest are helping with the construction draw and the other kind of complicated portions of that loan setup.
Well, Self-Help Federal Credit Union is acting as funds control and doing the construction management piece, working closely with Wellness. So that's the element that they're playing in this process.
Thank you.
We did get a couple of questions through the chat about the cost. I don't know, Bobby, if this is a question for you, but one of the costs is, what is the typical cost and how are you handling cost creep given supply chain issues and material cost variability? I realize that's a question.
Yeah, one of the
And if you have a question for the rest of the panelists, you got the mic.
yeah, that's a great question. And one of the great benefits of the Keys of Equity program is fixed cost pricing. So we've already taken into account any of those contingencies. And I believe our average cost is somewhere around $175,000. And that would include everything from permits to handing over the keys.
That's great. And did you have a question for the other panelists or a follow-up?
We have Wellness been working with our local credit union to help develop a kind of ADU funding product, which would typically act as an independent financing, and I believe they will take second position on the mortgage. So speaking about working with credit unions, that is exactly what we're working to do.
Great. Renee, do you want to bring in another regional perspective from not quite so far away as San Diego? This is kind of interesting because we have one nonprofit model and another nonprofit model. Did you have questions for the Oakland team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm so excited about this program. Having just moved back to Napa Sonoma area from Oakland, I am really thrilled to see this focus on serving the Black community in particular, and can't wait to learn from all of you. I already am. But I will just make a note that in the new year, we're going to be announcing a ADU loan product with the Redwood Credit Union. It's a HELOC in second position, which takes into account future property value for the LTV and future rental income for the DTI. But one of the things that I think is so key with this kind of public-private partnership is just clear communication across all of the partners and stakeholders, just getting down to the nitty-gritty of the operations. One of the things that surprised me when we first started partnering with our jurisdictions up here, and our program's a bit different because, as Denise has pointed out, we work with 14 cities and 2 unincorporated counties, so 16 different planning and building departments and mayor's offices and all of that. And I really love that you are based not at the city, but have the wonderful support of the city of Oakland. My question is, we had a situation where we were working with leadership at one of our jurisdictions, but that person had come into the city midway through our program launch. And so I made the assumption that they understood the ADU prioritization at their city. And it took months to figure out that actually they had not been told by their city teammates that ADUs were a priority for their city. And so it took, months of some miscommunications and misunderstandings until we all realized that had happened. And so my question is, how have you worked and how is the city of Oakland going to address ensuring that staff at all levels that are needed and key and crucial to getting these ADUs through are all aware of the priority? And what are your agreements with the city on that?
I'm not sure who on the Oakland team is best set to do that. Darin, are you still?
Yeah, I'm here and I can take a shot at that. Great question, Renee. I think that cities, and this is not to make excuses, it's just to be real, are pretty overwhelmed, whether you're talking about from the funding side or from the permitting side. That was only, compounded with COVID. we knew that this was going to be an important project, but a challenging project given that staff is overwhelmed and short-staffed. So early on, this project has actually been 2 years in the making. Early on, we got the department heads together with the mayor, and it came from the top. This is a high priority. The mayor is very supportive and made it very clear. And we have an assembled team in the housing department and the city's planning and building department that we meet with regularly. That doesn't mean it's all 100% super smooth. I mean, there's always bumps along the way. And I think a lot of it, to your point, is around communication. So it's just making sure that we have that open communication. When Wellnest came on board, they're going to be getting a pre-approval from the city. So all these designs are going to be pre-approved, hopefully to expedite the permitting process. The Wellnest team met with the city's planning and building team, and there's that ongoing communication. That doesn't mean that we're not doing all of our other work. We're still prioritizing other affordable housing and other high priority projects. So and things are slow. I'll just admit that our permit processing times are slower than we'd like. But that communication and that relationship is there so that when things come up, we can respond.
That's so incredible, Darin. And I have to say, getting to work in partnership with the staff at the municipalities has been one of the most rewarding parts of this work. And I am so excited that you all are doing this. So it's great.
I want to open up to the other panelists to make sure everyone gets a shot at their hot questions. Steve, did you want to ask a question of the Oakland team?
I've been answering some questions in the chat, so that's what I've been working on. So Darin, maybe the question to you, we're in 2 to 5 years, where do you see this program?
Wow, that's a great question, Steve. I think a couple things. One is, from just a basic customer service perspective, we need to have a city permitting system that is easy and effective. And sometimes I feel like we're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 5 years ago, the idea that we had, would have pre-approved plans and online submittals was unheard of. And so I think in another 5 years, I think we're going to be having hopefully much more streamlined, probably more mobile applications, maybe virtual inspections. I think that we're going to have to harness technology, but not instead of traditional face-to-face in-person interactions. What we found during COVID is that the benefit sometimes of just like sitting at a table and opening plans and working through things in person, losing that has been really, really tough. So I think we're going to have to figure out how to do both. I think that gives options. Prior to COVID, we actually experimented with having evening permit counter hours, because homeowners, many of them have day jobs and weren't able to come down to the permit center. So we experimented with keeping the permit center open at night so that homeowners could come in. So I think we've got to try a lot of things to make things accessible to ADU professionals and to homeowners. And then on the homeowner assistance and initiative side, what I'd like to see is all of these pilots, that we're doing in Oakland, around the Bay Area, around the state, really demonstrating the efficacy of ADUs and leading to additional financing products, the industry evolving so that it's just much more easier to build these things. And my hope is that we have hundreds of Black and lower income homeowners that are at risk of displacement in the city now able to stay because they have ADUs. So I'd love in 5 years to come back and say, we've built hundreds of ADUs and we have Oaklanders that now can stay in the city who might have been at risk before, and that now we also have a state program that does something similar across the state.
Well, just to give a shout out to the hopeful power of coalition. I think you guys know that the state has got an ADU grant program where they're partnering with lenders. I know in the next few years they're looking to expand that pool to include organizations like credit unions and perhaps cities in partnership with certified banking institutions. And because of their work in the space, they're starting to advance the dialogue with the federal GSEs about making ADU lending a more conventional kind of mortgage product. So let's keep that, like, to keep those requests clear and make sure we're all, like, Nikki has been on a couple of the calls with the team that's approaching the GSEs separately through Casita Coalition. So all of us speaking with one voice about the need for finance is, as Mayor Schaaf pointed out in the beginning, really important to make sure that this gets the attention it needs. I think the federal agencies in the state are only beginning to understand that if they don't change their lending practices, low and moderate income homeowners, Black and brown home, won't be able to get access to capital. People on a fixed income who you really want to benefit, like you said, will be locked out. So
And Denise, I had one more thing I wanted to add, which I think is important and we forgot to mention, and that is through the research and talking with Black homeowners and lower income owners about what it would, what we could do to help them, build ADUs. We talked about affordability restrictions on ADUs, and most ADU financing programs include affordability restrictions on the ADU itself. And so when we talked to owners about that, it was really clear that that would be an additional barrier and inconsistent with our goal of building wealth. And so we intentionally did not include affordability restrictions on ADUs. And I think most programs do. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have that. I'm just saying when you're designing a program with a particular focus, do the research, talk to the owners, and then design the program that you want. And so as a result, we don't have affordability restrictions for the ADU.
Well, and I think the fact that you did do all that research that is populated out across the state, and a lot of cities are not doing deed restrictions or doing unconventional ones. So San Diego has an ADU density bonus program where like every third ADU is affordable, but it's affordable in a way for a shorter term and where it doesn't screw up the homeowner's underlying financing or include a burdensome deed restriction that would make it impossible for them to do their business. So it's really treated as a benefit in exchange for delivering, more units. But yeah, those two homeowner barriers are really important when you're doing program design.
Tom had a question.
Tom, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing everyone's screen here. So yeah, please.
It's okay. Thank you. So this is for the team. I guess, in your outreach efforts, ADUs are not a new concept. They've been around for generations and generations, and we just know them under different names. I just wanted to ask the team, what in your outreach, what seems to be the most effective way to get a homeowner to understand this new old concept of an ADU?
Well, I'll say from our perspective, ADUs are new because they don't know what an ADU is. They, to your point, may know it as a granny flat or, some other unit. So our outreach really has been how to maximize your property, and do you have interest in generating income? And then from that, we, start talking them through the process to see if it makes sense. But what we've also had to do is to not make the assumption that everyone knows what it is and having to spell it out, accessory dwelling unit, and what does that mean so that people really understand. And I did want just to piggyback on the finance question before we got too far away. What we're learning is for the low income homeowner, the only two ways that they're going to get support is high subsidy to offset the cost. Because we know in any type of thing, either you have to increase income or reduce debt. So until we can understand how to reduce the cost, will it really be a viable option for the homeowner? If the cost does not get reduced, then there has to be significant subsidy to help offset it for those low income owners. What we're finding for those moderate income owners that are that 80 to 120, not necessarily a cost burden for them to take on the new debt. So as we're talking about the homeowners we want to solve for, sometimes low income gets coupled in with moderate, but there's some significant difference for those homeowners that are 80% and below.
The question came up in the Q&A, and also you guys mentioned the really large number of existing unpermitted ADUs in Oakland. And we've been finding in other communities that the homeowners with unpermitted ADUs are often the low and moderate income homeowners, and they're afraid someone's going to find out and turn them in, and they're going to be in for $100,000 of cost to have something they already own. And so the question, I guess, is, or I would value in our next conversation, your insights about how to handle unpermitted ADUs. We have a working group who's talking to cities about this now. We're, as you know, we've been issuing these best practice guidelines where we can. So we did one on finance, one on garage conversions. Unpermitted ADUs will probably be coming next year. But did your research or your initial programming have any advice about the unpermitted ADU topic? And then are you seeing more homeowners trying to do new prefab, or is it more like, you know, site built or wrestling with their unpermitted ADU to get to kind of get it out?
I'll speak from the programmatic standpoint and then have Darin speak from the city side. Yes, we have found that many of the people that are approaching us are dealing with legalization issues. And yes, there is some sensitivity of, you know, what will happen. From our perspective, we don't want to, you know, open up a can of worms. The real sensitivity, if they are currently leasing to a tenant, then that becomes an issue because of health and safety issues. But if it just happens to be a unit, we're willing to take an assessment, see what we can do within the models that we have available to try to make it work. And then the other piece that we're finding is also an issue is the property tax and assessment, because our homeowners also are realizing that that's going to impact if there are any changes. But if Darin, you want to speak on the legalization, because I know we've had conversations as we're going through this process.
Yeah, I think legalization is like the next frontier for Oakland. I think we wanted to start with something that was maybe, hopefully, a little more doable. There are great examples out there of legalization and amnesty programs that we've looked at. And I think, like to Nikki's point, there just really isn't a lot of incentive to legalize because you get that property tax hit. So if you want to have a program that's really effective, and there probably are people living in dangerous conditions that we really do need to upgrade that housing stock. But if you're going to do that, you need to have some good incentives, and that usually involves, you know, some financial assistance or some other kind of short-term assistance that if people don't take advantage of, then the city is going to do enforcement, and that sort of threat of a crackdown, so to speak, is necessary, but it's hard for Oakland to pursue that type of widespread enforcement just because of the volume. So I think, you know, it's possible that we might have some phases where there's some incentives or carrots, you know, so to speak, and then see what people come in, and then, you know, maybe go to enforcement. But that's you know, something that we'd have to work on next.
I think it's probably something the whole state is turning to next, right? People kind of we had to change the state law, got that piece done. Then you had to see how homeowners responded and what they were doing. I don't think anyone had any idea what the magnitude of the unpermitted ADU problem was until homeowners started coming forward with these unpermitted ADUs. And it raises, as you know, a whole host of code compliance, fees, tax assessment issues that are very thorny. So, you know, like we said at the beginning, there's more to be done. That topic will come up again for all of us next year. So as you guys go through the learning curve, please share any learnings you have. I know you've hired into Oakland Caleb Smith recently, who just put together in San Mateo County a really great series of programs with his colleagues, including an unpermitted ADU program. So,
and I'm sorry, if I can just speak on that, if we're talking about the equity lens, and if there's going to be research on how to solve, I think the bigger issue is going to be, why are they unlegalized units? Because what we found is we had one resident in West Oakland who shared the history, and it was back during redlining, that the inability for them to feel as though they were getting the support that they needed from the city. And so there's some underlying reasons of why they exist versus somebody just trying to skirt around the system. So I think that needs to be acknowledged. And if there is going to be amnesty in areas that were targeted and known, that those should be the areas that are getting the most support.
Denise.
I second that.
Denise, we work in a lot of legalization. We have a senior building inspector on staff. We're seeing from, beautiful, there was a technical glitch that they couldn't get the permit to things that are totally unsafe. So it's a huge wide range, and we think there's 10 to 20,000 illegal units just in Oakland. When I say illegal, they range from, really scary to it's just a lack of paperwork, right piece of paperwork. So
yeah, I think maybe in these sort of big learning sessions that we do next year, our ADU, and we're pretty much at time now. I want to be respectful of folks' time, and we've already been on for well over an hour. So we are next year. First of all, let me thank all of you for coming and doing this incredible work. These kind of conversations are so valuable, both for you to have the opportunity to share all the things you're learning every day about how to do this well, and also for other places to learn from you so that we're all learning a whole lot quicker. We're not learning in our little isolated silo. We're learning across the wide geography of state of California, and hopefully getting better and more, more appropriate, more equitable about how we look at this stuff as we learn. So much gratitude to Darin, to Nikki, to your whole team. There are so many of you, Lynette, Bobby. Thanks all for the work you're doing. And I think next year when we do our we're calling it Hot Topics in Small Housing, one of our hot topics is clearly this topic of unpermitted ADUs and what do we do, what's collectively can government and nonprofit partners do together. So thank you all for coming. I just want to mention that our next webinar will be the year-end wrap-up on ADU best practices. We didn't have enough time to get it deep into enough cities who'd really kind of gone beyond the basic state law requirements to do some real deep innovating. So we hope we'll highlight some additional best practices next year, as well as these particular thorny topics in small housing and in ADUs. But next month's presentation will be the summary of what we've learned together this year that will eventually go into a print guide, and they'll be available online. So you don't have to watch 12 webinars to get the point of, what should we be thinking about particularly when you're overwhelmed in local government, short-staffed, and, trying just to get your job done. So we want to make that easier for folks California-wide. And the presenter will be Josh Abrams from Baird and Driscoll Planning, who has been doing kind of ADU consulting to a number of jurisdictions throughout the state, created homeowner tools like ADU calculators. And we look forward to Darin's presentation next month. If you want to join that year-end wrap-up webinar, you can register by clicking on the Casita Coalition events place. And then finally, we are a membership coalition. And if you like what we're doing, please join the organization through our website. I think everyone who's on the panel today is officially a member. But by working together and having these conversations together, we really do begin to change the narrative around housing and to start creating a vision of California that isn't, I got mine, you go ahead and get yours, but we are all in this together, and we all need to work together in every neighborhood to create more inclusive and equitable housing outcomes. And many, many places and people and cities and nonprofits throughout the state share that vision. And we just want to make sure we're all together in one space, even if for now it's a virtual space with a website, so we can continue to learn from each other and to inspire each other and to raise new challenges, as I think Mayor Schaaf did at the beginning of the webinar today. There's going to be more to do in this space as this becomes a more significant part of California's housing future. I think last month we learned that 11% of all residential building permits statewide are ADUs. So with that kind of immense transformation in the housing supply market and in getting housing into every neighborhood, there are going to be issues. And so I invite you all to join the Casita Coalition, like us on Facebook, follow us on social media. I don't even know how to say all these words because that's generationally not my thing, but you all know what I mean, right? Get on social media and friend us and follow us. Make sure you sign up for our newsletters. And if you're interested in more active participation or sponsoring our next year's Hot Topic webinar series, please reach out to our Executive Director, Tom Limon, or our Policy Director, Celeste Goyer. Thank you all very much, and we will see you next month for the year-end wrap-up. Take care. Bye-bye. If the panelists want to hang out, we can do a quick check-in, see how it went.